Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Jerry Brown. Jerry received his Ph.D. in anthropology from Cornell University. He was a founding professor of anthropology at Florida International University, where he designed a course on hallucinogens and culture, which he taught annually until his retirement in 2014. His research, writing, and speaking on psychedelics is the product of a long collaboration with his wife, Julie M. Brown. And Julie is a psychotherapist who studies and photographs the role of sacred plants in religion. Jerry and Julie co-authored the Psychedelic Gospels, the Secret History of Hallucinogens and Christianity, which grew out of the research he was conducting for his course. And we're so happy to bring Jerry onto the Success Insight podcast. Jerry, welcome, and looking forward to chatting with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and happy holidays to you and your listeners.
Thank you so much. And first, I just want to acknowledge this is retirement 2014. And where have you and your wife retired to?
Well, we retired to Southern Europe.
Okay.
Just to be in a sunny climate, because we've lived in Florida and California most of our life. And we were looking for a place that, affordable, clean air and water, good food, and welcoming people. And we've found that, and we're very happy because it gives us the ability to focus on our research and writing and speaking about this topic of psychedelics and religion.
Fantastic. So I'm curious, you've had a long career studying as an anthropologist. It is such a fascinating field. How did you begin to study with this topic of hallucinogens and culture? Where did that kind of insight come from to want to do that?
Actually, it grew out of a very frightening LSD experience. My very first one that I had at something called a Rainbow Family Gathering, a kind of early Burning Man that took place high in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. And it really spun me into a Carlos Castaneda shamanic kind of world of power objects and power forces and strange people. And for a while, I thought I was losing my mind. I certainly didn't have any of the instant nirvana that Timothy Leary and others were preaching about. And I finally pulled out of it. I wanted to learn more. And as they say, if you want to learn something, teach it. So I designed and taught a course called Hallucinogens and Culture. It's Anthropology 4461 at Florida International University, probably the first 4-credit course at a university in the United States. And out of that, I decided to teach it as Harvard does for law and business through the case study method, well-established case studies showing the role of a psychedelic mushroom in the Soma of the Hindu Rig Veda, the world's oldest religious text, and many others. The Greek Eleusinian mysteries went on for 2,000 years, also used a hallucinogenic fungus, psilocybin-like fungus. In that process, during a 2000, I learned about mycology, the study of mushrooms, ethnobotany, the way in which different cultures use mushrooms, art history, theology, multidisciplinary study. We fast forward, and in 2006, Julie and I are on an anniversary trip to Scotland, and drawn there by the Davinci Code, Dan Brown's famous bestseller, became a film, The Davinci Code,
Sure.
Because Rosslyn Chapel, just about 14 miles south of Edinburgh, Scotland, was considered to be a resting place of the Holy Grail. We decided to visit. And Rosslyn, which is a Catholic church built between 1440 and 1480 by Sir William St. Clair, has a lot of sculptures in it. And one of the things they have there are these pagan-like, interspersed among the Catholic symbolism and Old Testament symbolism, is pagan symbolism. And we found the head of a green man that had embedded in it a perfect Amanita muscaria mushroom. Those are the red white dotted mushrooms. You see them a lot around Christmas time in displays. You see them in Christmas cards, Scandinavian folktales, even in Disney's Fantasia and elsewhere. And this started us thinking, why is there a psychoactive mushroom in a Catholic church? Could there be others? Was this part of Catholic ritual? How far back does it go? And our minds were kind of spinning out of almost to a rambunctious overthrow of reason. And then the words of Carl Sagan, the famous astrophysicist, came to mind. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. In other words, if you're going to tackle something as vast and as controversial as suggesting that Christianity has a psychedelic history, you better have extraordinary evidence. And after grappling with this for about 6 years, Howard, we realized that given what we knew, we would never rest. We would regret it the rest of our life if we did not go out and travel through Europe and the Middle East, visiting chapels and cathedrals, looking for evidence of psychoactive mushrooms in Christian art. We did that in 2012. We found stunning and compelling evidence, even that led to our aha moment that this was an alternative history of Christianity, a Psychedelic Gospels, all of which the photographs and our journey of discovery are documented in our 2016 book, The Psychedelic Gospels, The Secret History of Hallucinogens in Christianity.
That's quite a lot of information to kind of take in. And maybe we can kind of go back just a little bit and kind of piece it apart just a bit if we can. This visit to the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, that was an aha moment because you had been studying hallucinogens and culture for quite a while, the understanding of the mushroom. So that understanding and awareness of the use of mushrooms and psychedelics and hallucinogens, you had that knowledge prior to visiting the chapel. Is that true?
That's true. And that's why, as Pascal said, chance favors the prepared mind.
Right.
In other words, after having studied this topic, looking at hundreds of mushroom images over the years, mushroom identification,
sure,
I was able to recognize this.
Okay.
And if we ask the question, this sculpture was there and is still there today in Rosslyn Chapel, in the green man that's over the sacred altar where Mass is held in the front of the church. Why, for 500 years, did no one else recognize it? Why not art historians?
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Why not theologians? Because they don't study mycology or mushrooms. In doing this research, Julie and I had dinner with Paul Stamets, one of the world's most famous mycologists.
Right.
And he has a fabulous website called Fungi Perfecti. And he researches mushrooms. He makes medicinal mushroom formulas, been effective in cancer treatment. Anyway, and Paul said, this is a taxonomically correct Amanita muscaria mushroom. So we were encouraged. And then we decided that we had this knowledge, that we had the psychedelic eye, so to speak, to recognize these mushroom images, both Amanita muscaria, the red and white dotted mushroom, and psilocybin mushrooms, a very popular form. There's 100 varieties of psilocybin containing mushrooms that grow around the world, to go out. And in 2012, we traveled to England, Scotland, France, Germany, Italy, Greece, Israel, Turkey, studying and looking at artwork. We went to chapels, we went to cathedrals, we went to small parish churches, and we found in a variety of Christian artwork, early, going all the way back to 300 AD, up through the Middle Ages, prior to the Inquisition, images of these mushrooms in frescoes, which are wall paintings, in sculptures, in stained glass windows, in mosaics, and also in illuminated Bibles, richly illustrated Bibles and prayer books.
Jerry, let me ask you a quick question. Is one thing I've heard, and I don't know the origin of the statement, but and in the full spirit of disclosure, I'm not Christian, I'm Jewish, and it's still Judeo-Christian. There's an overlap, and we're right in the middle of some of that overlap right now in this holiday season. I've always heard that the Christianity and the birth of Christianity was essentially, it was created out of the pagan rituals that were practiced throughout Europe, especially like in Britain and in Ireland and the Celtic countries, that as it evolved, those pagan rituals then became or absorbed into Christianity. And is it possible that these imagery of, the mushrooms, a variety of mushrooms that you've just highlighted, that they were actually a part of the pagan, quote unquote, rituals that were just absorbed into Christianity? And it's almost as though they were just hiding in plain sight, but nobody, until like you and your wife, really thought to make that connection of this is more than just a pretty fresco or a pretty piece of stained glass. There's some history and reasoning behind these imagery.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of points here. First of all, we're not the only scholars who've looked into this topic. Not that it's very widespread, not that it's been accepted into the mainstream. There have been other scholars going back even 50 years ago who started to explore the relationship between psychedelics and religion. Number two, shamanism, the religion of our ancestors, of all the hunting and gathering people, many forms of shamanism, whether it be Siberian reindeer shamanism or Brazilian rainforest shamanism or Iboga use in Africa, used psychoactive plants. Why? Because in the shamanic worldview, there's the supernatural world, there's the underworld, and then there's, so to speak, Middle Earth. And the role of the shaman or the witch doctor in popular culture is to travel into those worlds, to meet with the ancestors, to meet with the gods and goddesses, and to bring back a benefit to the community, rain, good hunt, cure of illness. Modern religion evolved out of that. And we now find that the classical religions, such as the Hindu religion, the psychoactive mushrooms are documented in Buddhism, in the Greek religions, all had some involvement with psychedelics. In fact, Christianity emerged out of a circum-Mediterranean area that was rife with mystery cults, Neoplatonic cults, pagan cults, many of which use psychoactive mushrooms. The classic example are the Greek Eleusinian mysteries, which were practiced for 2,000 years, from 1500 BC to 400 AD, when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire. So obviously there is a background for this. Now, what is probably unique to our work has been discussed by other scholars, but probably documented photographically most extensively by myself and my wife, co-author Julie, is the presence of psychoactive mushrooms in a variety of Christian settings and across a variety of art mediums. So we started out in Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. We went to central France, and in a small church called St. Martin de Vic in central France, we had our aha moment where we saw a major fresco of Jesus Christ entering Jerusalem at the time of the Passover, at the time that would lead to his crucifixion. And on the wall, the youths welcoming him into Jerusalem, they're not holding palm fronds, they're holding psychoactive psilocybin mushrooms. Jesus is traveling towards the towers of Jerusalem. They're cutting down psilocybin mushrooms from the towers, and the mushrooms and the knives used to cut them are on the table of the fresco in the Last Supper, and the artist even depicts the shape of mushrooms in the hems of the disciples. That is where time kind of stopped for us. We had our aha moment, and we said, this has not been suppressed. There is a secret history for the elite, for the pagan and the ecclesiastical elite, for the initiates. And Pope Gregory said back in the 6th century, let art be the Bible of the illiterate, because most people were illiterate. So we're saying, yes, in addition to all the other magnificent creations of Christianity, there is also a psychedelic history here documented in the artwork.
Well, that's fantastic and very fascinating. And you and your wife, you traveled throughout Europe, the Middle East. How did you embark on that journey? I mean, were you going literally from church to church? Were there recommendations from your peers, visit certain churches? How did you kind of make that itinerary? Because that's collecting a lot of fascinating information and photographs.
So starting in 2006, when we first discovered the psychoactive mushroom in the Green Man sculpture at Rosslyn Chapel, to 2012, we were from time to time and sometimes intensively researching this area. So we saw images of psychedelic mushrooms that have been posted on the internet, that have been discussed in other works, classical Greek scholars, classical scholars writing on entheogens. And we decided to go out and go to these sites because anthropology requires that you do in-depth on-site field work. And many times these images on the internet are second and third hand, they're corrupted. It's hard to make them out. So we knew we would have to get original print quality photographs. In some of our travels, we would just talk to the locals and find out about this abandoned church or this abandoned chapel. Or we would look at something that someone said was a psychoactive mushroom in Germany. We were headed for Munich. Julie looked at it. She said, that's a saint holding a vial of holy oil. That's not a psychoactive mushroom. And we went off to Hildesheim, where Bishop Benoit had created a psychoactive mushroom legacy. And here we took a look. We found certain things in central France. But what is this? Are these some hippie priests cavorting in the forest, far away from the church and the crown? We would have to go to the high holy places of Christendom. So we went to Chartres Cathedral. We went to Canterbury Cathedral. We went to Hildesheim in Germany. Hildesheim is no marginal church. It was built by Bishop Bernward, who was the tutor to Otto III, who became the Holy Roman Emperor. And Bishop Bernward himself became sainted by the Catholic Church. So we also found these both in small chapels, but also in high holy places, like in 7% of the stained glass windows in Chartres Cathedral.
So all the research, and this culminated in the book, The Psychedelic Gospels, The Secret History of Hallucinogens and Christianity. Who are the consumers or the target audience for this book? Who's your ideal reader for the book?
Well, it's interesting because the reviews, our book is available on Amazon, of course, the Psychedelic Gospels.
Right.
And if you look at the reviews, they come from a variety of people. Some of them are people who said, look, I'm a Catholic, but I also thought there was something deeper. Some of them say, I'm Catholic, but I always wanted a direct experience of the divine, not something mediated through a text or through the word of a priest. And one of the things that's happened in the field of psychedelic studies is to move away from the pejorative implications of the word psychedelic coming out of the Nixon Leary years, is that scholars have called these chemicals and plants entheogens, from the Greek root word within, and theo, God, generate. Plants, sacred plants that generate a sense of the divine within, because these plants allow one to access an alternative mystical view of reality. And this has also been confirmed in modern research. So this is how we went about it. Some of it through tracking other people's research, some of it through discoveries we made on our own, like in Turkey, where we found incredible images in the cave churches of the Ahara Valley of Turkey, where early Christians fled as early as the 1st century to avoid Roman prosecution. And it's the first place in which people were actually called Christians.
So the use of the mushrooms as hallucinogens and to get closer to the mystical, a mystical view of this reality, how does that contrast to, like, today? I mean, I live here in Europe. I'm in Chicago, Illinois. At January 1, the use of marijuana is going to be legal here. So anybody, even me, can go out to the local dispensary, approved dispensary, and buy some. And do you see that your research, your highlighting the use of the mushrooms in the mysticism, in the religion and Christian religion and elsewhere, is that also leading to the further study of it as the medical use, in addition to the mystical view of it?
Absolutely. As we've seen with marijuana, legalization follows medicalization. Once people realize that these are safe, that there are many medicinal applications for THC and CBD oil. This is a bipartisan issue because conservatives don't want to see the federal government standing between a doctor's recommendation saying to a patient that smoking marijuana or taking marijuana is going to help you relieve the nausea or fatigue from cancer treatment. So we've seen the legalization of marijuana, both for medical in some areas and recreational in lesser states throughout the United States. This has been followed by an effort at the city level, both in Denver and Oakland, and now being contemplated right in your city of Chicago and Dallas, to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms, which means to make them the lowest law enforcement priority. And there are initiatives being posted on the ballot in Oregon, Vermont, and California to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms for therapeutic and also recreational work. The bigger point here is, why would people want to explore these in a religious context? Because, as Julie and I found out, we were not particularly religious. We had our first experience of what one could call the divine in our lives through psychedelic substances back in the 60s and 70s. And that was kind of a background that we had here. And what happened now is that in 1962, there was an experiment called the Miracle of Marsh Chapel, conducted at Marsh Chapel at Boston University, in which Walter Pankey, a divinity researcher, took two groups of divinity students, put them in the basement of Marsh Chapel in a room there on Easter Sunday, listening to the sermon, gave one group psilocybin, the other group B12 niacin that would give them sort of a flush rush feeling. 9 out of 10 people who had the psilocybin had a full-blown mystical or religious experience. Only one of the control group did. This research was replicated by Roland Griffiths, the grandfather of the psychedelic renaissance, at Johns Hopkins University in the early 2000s. And now Roland Griffiths, who came to this research with 300 peer-reviewed papers on substance abuse and drug addiction, incredible, impeccable credentials, has been able to show that one, MDMA, known as ecstasy, has been helpful in helping veterans overcome post-traumatic disorder, in helping psilocybin's been useful in helping people with treatment-resistant depression overcome that, and helping terminally ill people overcome their anxiety and fear of death. And here we're talking about 70 to 80% success rate with one or two psychedelically assisted psychotherapy sessions with a clinical setting, with nurses and doctors present for qualified subjects for this research. And what Griffiths said is, when you have 60 or 70% of people having a positive result, and they're also finding that the effectiveness of the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is directly correlated with the intensity of the mystical experience. So now we find a very fascinating link between the role of mystical experience, which has been fundamental in all religions, certainly including Moses in Judaism and saints in Christianity, finding its role in modern research, where scientists miraculously are predictably able, with psychoactive substances, both mainly in a synthetic form, able to induce a healing mystical experience in patients. 33% say this is the most significant spiritual experience I've ever had in my life, and another 38% is one of the top 5. So our book is directed as anyone who's interested in spirituality and religion and mysticism. It's directed to those 20% of Americans who say, I'm spiritual but not religious, in the Pew Center research study, including some 30% of youth, and to those 30 million Americans who have tried psychedelics at least once in their lifetime. And so we have had the good fortune that our work came out just as the psychedelic renaissance is really presenting a new face of scientifically valid medical enhancement and results that are going now through FDA approval through rigorous scientific tests. So there is a convergence between saying, yes, this was used in ancient times in healing and religion, and it's now being resurrected in modern times.
Jerry, and that's fascinating. And if our listeners would like to learn or continue to learn more about this topic, I mean, most certainly we're going to provide a link back to your book, The Psychedelic Gospels, The Secret History of Hallucinogens and Christianity, on our show notes, and the link back to Amazon. But if they would also like to learn more about you and your wife's work and kind of get to know you, perhaps to reach out and contact you, where are the best places for them to go?
The best places are, obviously, our book is on Amazon, Psychedelic Gospels. You can like our Facebook page, Psychedelic Gospels, and we put up all of our posts there related to both the psychedelic renaissance and our research on psychedelics and religion. We have an Instagram page, Psychedelic Gospels. We have a Pinterest page, Entheogens Are Us. And you can also most directly go to our website, www.psychedelicgospels.com, www.psychedelicgospels.com, where you can see our photographs, follow our work, and also contact us.
That's fantastic. And we will most definitely provide those links on our show notes, the website, the social sites, as well as to the Amazon page. Jerry, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. I know it's the afternoon in Europe and you are in paradise. And so I hope you enjoy it, and looking forward to continuing to learn more about you and your wife's work and your travels, and really the ongoing discovery of this lifetime of research that you both have embarked on. So thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. And so will our audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Howard. Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to all of your listeners.
Likewise. There you have it, folks. We've been chatting with Dr. Jerry Brown. Jerry is along with his wife, the authors of the book, The Psychedelic Gospels, The Secret History of Hallucinogens and Christianity. And again, this grew out of the research that Jerry was conducting in his career as a professor of anthropology at Florida International University. We will, as we shared earlier, provide all the backlinks on our show notes to their website, psychedelicgospels.com, as well as the social sites like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And hey, this time of season, it's an interesting topic, and it goes to show when you go to a historical site like Rosslyn or St. Martin's in France or wherever you're visiting, take the time not just to take the picture and the selfie, but look at the imagery. And there's a lot more there. And sometimes we just have to take the time just to admire and observe and listen and to talk to people about what their experience is as well. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.